Reddit, what are some dark secrets in companies' histories that we wouldn't expect? A lot of younger people might not know, but in the early 90s, Jack in the Box suffered a huge setback after a bunch of people suffered from food poisoning from E. coli after eating their hamburgers. It killed 2 kids, but the public backlash was really bad. People were scared to eat a burger from Jack in the Box after that. The mosaics at Disneyland were created by a former Nazi SS interrogator, and the rocket into Tomorrowland was designed by another former Nazi SS officer, both in the US through Project Paperclip, a program that essentially forgave high-ranking Nazis if they agreed to work for the US government. That time in the 60s when the Jersey mob bought out Warner Brothers using money laundered through a funeral home and parking lot company, the Kinney Company. Coco Chanel. She tried really hard to have property stripped from her Jewish partners during the German occupation of France. She may have also been a German spy/sexual partner of an SS officer. A lot of companies made things for the Nazi Germany. Quaker Oats funded a research project in the early 1900s that involved feeding disabled people oatmeal with radiation in it. This happened at the Fernald School, what was once a leader in how institutions should handle people with disabilities. MIT and Harvard also funded the project. These aren't particularly dark or unexpected, to be quite honest, but SiriusXM is shady as shit. At one point SXM's records were subpoenaed in an attempt to determine if the company was at fault for a plane crash resulting in deaths after they shut off a customer service due to non-pay, as SXM also provides navigation and weather systems for aircraft and boats. After that happened, SXM M&A services won't automatically shut off if you don't pay. Customers aren't given refunds for automatically renewed services that they didn't want, and even in some cases had called to cancel about, because automatic renewal is covered in the terms and conditions. No one is required to refund you. The system that manages the accounts is very glitchy and many times customers will get double charged without being notified. Agents receive a ding if a customer cancels. So lots of shady stuff goes on, especially in Quezon, where agents will fudge their notes to avoid taking a hit, leaving customers out hundreds of dollars. Phone records are only kept for 2 years, which further derails the process of obtaining proof. A majority of their centers are based overseas, which puts you in contact with agents who read scripts and aren't fluent in conversational English, which is a deliberate attempt to make it more difficult for customers to receive the services they request. Kellogg's. The founder believed sex was the cause of disease. Created cornflakes because he thought that a food so bland would discourage people from masturbating. He was known to castrate young boys if he ever caught them touching themselves or masturbating. Sounds like a wholesome fella. Fanta was created by Coca-Cola so it could continue selling soda pop in Nazi Germany. The idea for Oreo sandwich cookies was stolen from Hydrax, which are now coincidentally considered a cheap Oreo knockoff. Bayer/BASF, the pharmaceutical and chemical manufacturer known for their aspirin, produced Zyklon B, the chemical that was used in the gas chambers in Nazi Germany. The company was called Igfarben at that time, and later became Bayer. The Ford Pinto started production in 1971, and it had a bad habit of bursting into flames when rear-ended, because the fuel tank was mounted in the back and not shielded well enough. Ford was aware of the issue, but didn't think it warranted a recall. They actively lobbied against stricter design regulations in documents submitted to the government. Ford estimated the cost of fuel system modifications to reduce fire risks and rollover events to be $11 per car across 5 million cars and light trucks, all manufacturers, for a total of $137 million. The design changes were estimated to save 180 burn deaths and 180 serious injuries per year, a cost to society of $49.5 million. In other words, increased regulations for all manufacturers will cost society a lot more, though they should save a few hundred people. The NHTSA started an investigation specifically on the Pinto in 1974. The Pinto was not recalled until 1978, and though the recall was voluntary, they were days away from being forced. and Ford disagreed with the NHTSA's findings of defect, instead citing public concern as the reason. That same year Ford was forced to pay $127.8 million in a single lawsuit stemming from a fatal rear-end collision. There were apparently 117 lawsuits related to the Pinto, so who knows how much it ended up costing them altogether. The founder of Ike was an artsy sympathizer. Think we just found out last year how bad Equifax is? They have been horrid for years. They used to be called the Retail Credit Company. Back in the day, they didn't just keep track of if we paid our debts. They tracked many personal details like schooling, jobs, and even marital trouble and details of your sex life, some of which was based on nothing more than rumor. The idea was that people could deny credit to people morally lacking. After a disastrous congressional hearing where they fully realized they sounded like idiots defending the practice, they realized their name was so tainted, they had to change the name. They changed it to Equifax. Not a dark secret. Quite the opposite. The founder of Leica Cameras was an artsy who joined the party so he could continue making the cameras. He was actually smuggling Jews out of Germany in a very similar fashion to Schindler. After a strike at a Coca-Cola factory in South America, union leaders started disappearing at like once/week. There's a documentary about it. I'm a little hazy on the facts. Yeah, Coca-Cola has had their hands in some really ducked up paramilitary shit. Is it common knowledge yet that Hugo Boss designed the SS uniforms? Candy companies were pretty cutthroat, which is what inspired Willy Wonka. Not a company, but a country. When I was a kid in school, much is made of Switzerland and how they were magically and miraculously neutral. You get older and learn how they banked extensively with the Third Reich in exchange for being placed on the back burner of countries to invade next. Bill Gates is known for his warm fuzzy image as a philanthropist and has done a lot to earn it, but as a businessman he was ruthless. The embrace, extend, extinguish policy is probably the best example of what I mean. They leverage the ubiquity of Windows and their API to modify and steal existing products, destroying other businesses and ultimately leading to the antitrust lawsuit at the end of the 90s. Netscape is a good example of a business that became obsolete once Microsoft copied their browser to make IE, put IE right on everyone's desktop, and made it very difficult to download, install, and run Netscape. They even doctored videos presented at the antitrust trial to make it look as if installing and running Netscape was much easier than it actually was. Look up dead peasants insurance tactic used by companies. It's really shady and immoral. One big example is a case vs Amegy Bank. The guy who invented and marketed sea monkeys was a KKK supporter. Supporter as in donated money to them constantly and even spoke at their rallies. There's a video about it on YouTube. Something like the dark secret behind the inventor of sea monkeys. Guy was ducked up. Rupert Murdoch bought a bunch of cheapish TV stations through a puppet company in NFC football markets in the early 1990s. Then he switched their network affiliation to Fox. A little later he bought the NFC football contract away from CBS for Fox. Then with the value of the new programming he sold off many of those stations and made lots of money. Curiously, Fox Broadcasting has now gone back gobbling up many of those same stations after other owners in most cases. Currently Fox Broadcasting owns the Fox affiliates in every NFC city except Seattle, New Orleans, and Green Bay. Rumors are swirling that they are about to buy Seattle and possibly Green Bay soon. And that is why Fox just bought the Thursday Night Football contract. 2-3 games per week on the network, and they own about 30 stations in the biggest markets. Wasn't Coca-Cola originally made with cocaine? Could be a false rumor, but I've heard it in many places. Yes it was. It was advertised as a headache cure. The reason cocaine was late made illegal is because they linked it with higher crime rates. I guess the high helped with headaches. The person who invented Comic Sans was a Microsoft engineer. Microsoft continues to peddle this font through its Office applications. Don't get me started on Elf on a Shelf. I've already suspended for that one. Volkswagen was the brainchild of Hitler as the people's car for his Aryan nation. IBM helped facilitate through their punch card record keeping systems both the Holocaust and Japanese internment. Mitsubishi made the planes that bombed Pearl Harbor. Coca-Cola has bumped off more than a few people trying to unionize their workers in South America. McDonald's was founded by two brothers, but they got conned out of it and died penniless. Thanks to the toys that made us, Barbie was originally modeled after a prostitute doll from Germany. The Volkswagen scandal that continues to kill people. I believe there was a post somewhere a while back where a Reddit user detailed how Dole, the banana company, sicked the FBI on the government of an African nation because the nation was trying to force Dole to sell them the land they were using for banana farms. Dole successfully persuaded the FBI to institute a revolution in the country to overthrow their government so that Dole wouldn't be forced to sell their farms. I think the funniest part of this story was that Dole was being offered a fair market price for the land. So it wasn't like the country was trying to steal it. Definitely worth a Google, because I might not be 100% correct, and it's an entertaining read. Siemens used war prisoners and Jews in extermination camp as slave laborers during World War II. Fanta is essentially Nazi Coca-Cola. During World War II, Coca-Cola Germany could no longer get ingredients/syrup from the States, for obvious reasons, so they made their own flavors with what they could get their hands on. So drinking Fanta is essentially drinking Nazi Coke. A lot of car manufacturers have symbols that look like propellers because they got their start making airplanes. Many of them for an Axis power. BMW, spinning prop logo that made Nazi fighter planes. Mitsubishi made the Japanese Mitsubishi Zero. Volkswagen Group during the Dieselgate fiasco gassed monkeys in a fake lab experiment to prove their new TDI clean fuel engines were not harmful to humans. They hooked up a tube/pipe from the end of a car's exhaust pipe and routed it into a box where the monkey was sitting and watching cartoons. They trained the monkeys to watch cartoons. Before you ask, these engines were not in fact emitting clean exhaust fumes. They were actually pumping out almost 40x more nitric oxide, I believe, than what was allowed by CA's CARB standards. They were using a modified version of their defeat device software to prove they had remedied their false emissions claims. This is pretty appalling due to how recently this happened. 2015. That time Bayer knowingly sold a whole bunch of HIV-infected hemophilia medicine to Asia and Latin America under the guise that their customers doubted the effectiveness of the new drug. Basically, this injectable medication was made from donated plasma, and after a few hemophiliacs showed up with HIV, Cutter Biological, a division of Bayer, started to realize that maybe HIV was transmitted through blood plasma. So the rational thing to do is immediately pull all of it from the market while they figure out what to do, right? Not if you're Bayer, apparently, because if you're Bayer, you just shunt all that infected medication to Asia and some Latin American countries for a year or two while you manufacture a new treated medicine without all the HIV. There were some other companies that sold infected medication as well. But Bayer was the most prominent one who tried to continue making a buck off of knowingly selling infected medication. There were a bunch of lawsuits worldwide and hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. But no one ever faced criminal prosecution. Between 6,000 and 10,000 people in the United States were infected with HIV as a result. But I don't recall ever seeing numbers for the other markets. McDonald's founding story. Just look it up. It's sickening. This family's brother's business was ripped underneath their feet by a greedy and selfish businessman. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit universe.